Okay, everyone. Welcome to week 5. Yes, I know time flies quickly. If you go to week 6, 7, because I have combined 6 and 7, week 6 and 7. So there is a recording of the previous year's workshop on how to write the commentary. The commentary is the very first major assignment. And it would require everyone to write a commentary, a critical reflection, a critical review of 2 pretty lengthy pieces of writing, which I discussed very briefly today a bit. But I would like to invite everyone to watch these, the recordings from the past. We even had last year, in 2022, we had a kind of a workshop, and together with the students, we mark the examples from the past, so you can also watch that and see what is expected, what is not expected, and so on and so forth, and the criteria, the standards that we apply practically in marking the assignments. These assignments are not the very best, and they're not the very worst, the one that sit in the middle, so you can see the strengths and weaknesses at the same time. And another consultation session on how to write the critical commentary. So I strongly recommend that everybody would start as soon as they can, as soon as you can, start reading those 2 lengthy articles. Actually, one of them is a book chapter and the other one is a journal article. And the topic of them are not about they're not addressing capitalism. They're practically addressing post-capitalist alternatives. And both post-capitalist alternatives, the first one, you can find everything about the assignment if you go to assignment number 2, critical review of reading materials, or in other words, the commentary. So everything you need to know is there. So the size, the expected size, that you can go up and down by 20%. It's 800 words, but I'm flexible. There's a commentary question. There's a question that you need to answer, that's a guiding question. It's very simple. It's just asking you, how useful these 2 pieces of writing are in terms of giving us a good sense of what the alternatives are. So how do these readings enhance our understanding of the potential scope, the strengths and weaknesses inherent in the post-capitalist alternatives? So these are the very first encounters we have with the alternatives. So criticism of capitalism will end today, and from next week onward, we're going to deal with the alternatives. We're going to make ourselves familiar with alternatives, but remember that our approach to alternatives is not going to be a passive one. It would be unfair, and we just don't want to simply worship any alternative to capitalism simply because capitalism is bad, and is therefore any alternative to capitalism should be better or should be good. It's not a good bad thing. So the critical thinking, the skills that we have developed so far in relation to criticism, in relation to capitalism, we would like to extend that to the alternatives. Why is that? Well, because we don't want to replicate and repeat the mistakes and problems and the flaws of the system. So the more one of the reasons that we wanted to take a very critical approach to capitalism, to the core aspects of capitalism, was to actually equip ourselves with the necessary skills in building alternatives that would not actually reproduce the problems capitalism has, or reproduce the problems we have been historically suffering from, like gender inequalities, like racial inequalities. Many of such things have been in the previous attempts to go beyond capitalism. Many nasty, ugly things have happened. We would like to make ourselves aware of them and we would like to make sure that in future, in any way, we're going to contribute to the development of such alternatives. We would not be reproducing the problems. So these two, and these are the required readings. These are the two pieces of writing that we would like to reflect on them and write the commentary about them. The first one is written by Chris Rogers, and it's about capitalism and its alternatives. He only reviews 3 classical alternatives. The 3 are libertarianism, which is actually not an alternative to capitalism. You would say it's a capitalist alternative, or it's capitalism on a steroid. Why as an alternative? Well, because many of these libertarians say the reason that we are in this mess is because we haven't been truly embracing capitalism. So he criticizes that. In doing that, remember, he goes into a lot of philosophical discussions that even don't make perfect sense to me. I'm not a philosopher, can't pretend. So we need to be very strategic. Another skill that we would like to develop in this course, and not just this in this course, but in every other course, that skill would be very, very useful to every one of us. And that skill is to be strategic. Always be strategic. There is too much information, too much complexity in the information. So we can't really task ourselves to understand every sentence, every word, every term. That's not that really necessary. What we want to develop as a skill is to, as I said, is to be strategic in our reading. And we would just like to understand the very major arguments in each section of these articles. So the good thing about Rogers and also the Wendy Harker, the second one, is that they have actually divided their work, their writing into sections, and they address alternatives one by one. And the good thing about Rogers is that he gives you, at the end of each section, when he discusses each one of those alternatives, he gives you a conclusion. And so you can practically just look at the introduction part of each section, each alternative, and the conclusion part of each section, and get the grasp the gist of it, the spirit of it. And that would be more than enough, because we only have 800 words. Okay, so we would like to make sure that everybody is on the same page in terms of understanding the general argument these guys are offering us. And in the end, Rogers gives us an overall conclusion. And so he takes a critical approach. He's a sympathizer with socialism and anarchism, but he wants to be an insider critic and tell us that what went wrong with these alternatives, and how should we look at the alternatives. We shouldn't look at them as the products, put on the shelf that we can go and buy them and bring them home and apply them or use them. Our relationship with these alternatives shouldn't be like a consumer relationship. We are very much indoctrinated by capitalism to think that we are consumers. You even talk to a friend and talk about alternatives. Well, where is the alternative? Well, what is the alternative? Well, the alternative is you and me. When we start believing in ourselves, and when we start thinking differently, and we start behaving differently, and when we come together to form collective actions, and that's when the alternative starts to emerge. So that's a very interesting point, interesting argument that we can reflect on. And the second one, Wendy Harker, talks about more modern, newer kind of alternatives, not the classical one, not the giant ones like socialism, anarchism. So these are place-based, feminists, indigenous, Green New Deal, those sort of things. They're not meta-narratives, they're not giant narratives, they're more practice-oriented, and they're more modern. So that's the difference. And actually these two articles, even if they are published in 2014, are pretty old, 10 years old. I haven't been able to find anything comparable to these two, because they complement each other. One covers the classicals, the other one covers the modern ones, and their approaches are also a little bit different. So it would be, it's one of the expectations that towards the end of your commentary, you make a comparison between these two. In terms of their approaches, in terms of the type of alternatives they have covered, and so on and so forth. Rogers reflects directly himself on the alternatives, whereas Wendy Harker is a bit different. She looks at the alternatives through the lens of the literature. So she doesn't reflect on them directly, as someone who is studying them directly. But the literature is rich enough for her. It just sounds like she's doing a literature review, but with an active voice. So these are very super interesting, super insightful articles, and I really, even if not for the sake of the assignment, for the sake of learning something really special, really special, and especially we're at the turning point in this course, in this semester. We would like to later would like to enter into the realm of alternatives, so we would like to be well equipped and well skillful when we get in there. For the first time, I'm actually giving people something that would help them, hopefully, as a template you would like to consider, or maybe some instructions on how to structure. So I have put, number of words for each section, but I mean, they're not written on the stone, so you can be flexible with that. So, for the introduction, you do this. For the analysis of Rogers, you do this. Then go on and move forward to the analysis of Harker's perspective and do this, and then make a comparison as the comparative discussion or conclusion, if you like. 200 words, about 200 words. We need to be very succinct, very concise, and up to the point. And that's, again, one of the skills, that choose to be able to actually produce something as short as this, but still, very self-revealing. I have even shared, again, as I said before, examples that are marked, and you can see the comments in there. So you can see what are the problems that we should avoid. Yes, and the assessment evaluation criteria, and again the same recordings from the past that you can watch. But I would like you watch one of them and then make yourself familiar with the assignment, and then start reading the two and take notes of them. Bear in mind, the instructions and the expectations when you read and when you take notes, and then start writing as soon as you can. Always it's interesting. People think that they should first read everything and understand everything, and then they should sit back and start writing. That's not the best way forward. You better to mix reading and writing. So when you take notes and put them into the draft that you want, and then later you have something to work on, rather than an empty space, a blank page. So the sooner you start writing, the better. It doesn't matter if your writing goes wrong, you have still something to fix. It's better than nothing. Okay. I hope I'm making sense, and I would like to really emphasize on the importance of this assignment, and the fact that unfortunately it's been affected by. But then in week 7 we will come back, and fortunately our class is on the early week, so I expect that people would come back with some kind of a draft, or at least some questions or concerns maybe. So we can discuss the commentaries, We can discuss the concerns and questions. My concern is that still it would be a little bit too close to the deadline, because the deadline for this is when the beginning of the mid-semester break, almost the end of week 7. So it would be a little bit too late to run a workshop by then, but well, some people may be leaving it to the very last week. I don't know, but I would advise to the opposite. Start as soon as you can, so we will have something to discuss in week 7 when we come back. So that would compensate for the absence of classes in week 6. So look at week 6, 7 module. Look at the assignment description for assignment number 2, the commentary. Please very carefully, very closely, and start reading and writing as soon as you can. Also watch the recordings from the past. Hopefully you will find them useful. Take note of anything that concerns you, anything that doesn't make sense to you, any question that emerges in the process of reading and writing. Bring those questions to the class on Zoom, or put them into the forums, the weekly forums, or the forum for this assignment. I will immediately receive an email from the system, and I will respond to those questions as soon as I can. Any questions? Anything? Yes. This week topic, as you know, is about the ecological profile or aspect of capitalism. And the title that I have chosen for this week is Anthropocene or Capitalocene. Will the planet survive capitalism? It's obvious that the aim is to actually see to what extent the climate crisis, the environmental crisis that we are experiencing these days, especially more recently over the last few decades, things have become more intensified. To what extent they are related to the core aspects of capitalism? That's a very important question, because if we think that, if we realize that they are very much related to the core aspects of the system, therefore to expect that the solutions from within the system or within the framework of the system are going to help us would be a little bit optimistic, and therefore it would it would require us to go beyond the system and seek solutions beyond the system. This doesn't cancel out reform, because as many of us have recently realized, it's the revolution is not going to come overnight. So it's very difficult to change a system that has become globalized. We acknowledge that, and as the result of that, we cannot afford postponing reform to a revolution that may come or may not come, or if it comes, it might be too late. So we have to, any reform can actually make things a little bit perhaps less severe for the revolutionary forces, and the pressure from the revolutionary forces can actually push for reforms. So to think that the reform and revolution are two contradictory things is a mistake, perhaps, and they can complement each other. It doesn't, you see that, especially over the 20th century, a lot of disputes between revolutionaries and reformists were practically baseless, and they actually, they could actually get united. So the concept, I don't know, are you familiar with the concept of Anthropocene? What does that mean? The latest episode in the geological history of the planet Earth, where, as you said, the human impact is so significant that we can actually name that episode after this human impact, or in relation to it. So anthropo means humans, right? And scene at the end means new. So it's a new era where human impact is so significant that changes the way the Earth system is organized and is structured and behaves. We in social sciences, but why I have added the word Capitalocene? Because in social sciences we have we don't have a very comfortable, easy relationship with concepts like Anthropocene. It's not the only one, because when we talk about humans, I mean, what exactly we mean? I mean, every human being has been equally responsible, and every human being is being equally vulnerable and exposed to such impacts. So obviously, it's not every human, and to think that it's anthropo, it's human related, it may imply that there is something in human nature that has resulted in, or it's a, it has some elements of truth, and it stresses on the impact of humans versus non-humans, right? And the fact that now we have a species, as you said, that has gained such a power, but not everyone is equally responsible for the mess. And if we, for instance, use another alternative terminology like Capitalocene, that would stress on the fact that, well, actually, let's emphasis on the role of not just humans but also capitalism, because humans been around for millennia, right? But what we have been witnessing is really more recent. It doesn't mean that humans prior to the modern time or capitalist time had no impact on the environment or the earth system, but that was very much minimal, and the earth system still had the biocapacity to to regenerate itself, despite the impact, the human impact. So as you can see that, so if we would like to shift the emphasis on the system that is responsible, maybe another terminology would complement. I'm not saying that these two are contradicting each other, but I would say that it depends on the context. If the context is, especially in social sciences, we would like to emphasize on the way that societies are structured and the relationships are structured, and the political economic systems, the cultural systems that we adopt and their impacts, rather than blaming everyone equally, as it may be implied when we use words like Anthropocene. Think of other terms like global. When we say global warming, well, it helps us to understand the scale of the problem that is global. Yes, it's global. The warming that is happening is global. But not every region, not every society, not every community is being affected by that, by the change equally, and not every society or community is responsible. So you see that, more vulnerable, poorer countries and communities are more exposed, and they are less responsible. The ones that are more responsible are the ones that are actually benefiting from the situation more. So as you see, this is very much, it's an imbalance and disparity and inequality that is very much embedded in an apparently ecological problem called global warming or climate crisis or climate chaos or climate change, if you like. And so each word or each term that we use, each concept that we use, each notion that we use has its own limitations and its own perhaps elements of truth. So like the previous weeks, we would like to examine a myth or emotion, which you can see the similarity that capitalism is naturally nature friendly, or capitalism at least can become ecologically sustainable if it hasn't. It's the best system we have, even if it's not perfect. And since it's the best system, possibly it's more likely to make it more compatible with our, with our ecological sustainability standards and so on and so forth. And then normally the ideology behind this, in order to justify the argument, normally they refer to again the surface reality, comparing the advanced societies with the poorer countries, in saying, okay, well, the advanced capitalist societies, as the result of achieving higher rates of growth, have amassed more greater amounts of wealth and their resources, and also knowledge and technology, and they're more capable of addressing their ecological concerns, versus the poorer countries. Again, you see that they're not blaming the victim. The poorer countries haven't been able to achieve higher rates of growth, economic growth, and they're not capable of dealing with their ecological concerns. So lack of productivity, lack of technological advancement that are normally secured through the adoption of capitalist relations would result in not only poverty, but also incapacity of societies to address their ecological concerns and mitigate and climate change or adapt themselves to the new situation. So the solution is to expand further capitalism deeper into the global south and make them more developed, so they would become more economically prosperous enough to develop the needed technology in order to protect themselves, and then altogether we can mitigate climate change in the end. Well, that's again, as you can see, this is surface reality. Some elements of truth in there, yes. The wealthier you are, of course, you're better off and you're in a better condition to address the problem. But where does the problem come from? It comes from you accumulating wealth and going for technologies that damage the environment in the first place and put us in this mess in the first place, and so on and so forth. Yeah, referring back to that, Anthropocene thing, this is a very interesting chart that shows the temperature of the planet Earth for the last 500 million years. And you can see that the temperature has been on a roller coaster. It's been very, very difficult for humans to emerge, and then finally when they emerge, it has been very, very difficult for them as a result of instability in the temperature to develop civilizations, human civilizations. So it only happened in the Holocene era, that started after the very last major ice age, that the temperature became stabilized, as you can see towards the end, and as the result of that stabilization, humans could actually develop human civilizations. Settlements happen, agricultural revolution happened, and so on and so forth. So, but in recent time, in the last few decades, we see that the temperatures are shooting up again, and they may very soon destabilize this situation and put us on back into the roller coaster. So that's the beginning of Anthropocene, according to some scientists, although that term is not officially adopted by international scientific commissions and organizations that are responsible for the terminologies. But the term has been widely used by many scientists, especially those who are very much concerned. So the argument is that the Holocene that actually made it possible for humans to develop civilizations and achieve the progress is being ended by Anthropocene, again a product of human activity, which is ending that era that helped human civilization to emerge. So it's like the bacteria in a lab dish that they eat a lot and they multiply themselves to until there is not much to eat except themselves, and they They emit a lot of poison and then kill each other. So you see, these red arrows are the mass extinction that happened. They were the products of natural events, especially the very last one, as they estimated, was caused or instigated by a comet hitting the planet Earth and those sort of things. But the very last, the one that we are experiencing today, we are experiencing another mass extinction, the sixth mass extinction, is the result of the so-called human activity, so the loss of the species, the plants and animals, as well as the biodiversity, 40% gone over the last few decades since the 70s, I believe, and it has put us into a very difficult situation. Again, back to the surface reality. I mean, yeah, you can compare that. Why not? Let's compare the advanced societies with the less advanced societies, the developed ones versus the developing ones. And this chart is a very interesting one because, and it's not very new, 2006. Things might have been even worse now. So the red line, the vertical red line shows the level of human development based on the Human Development Index adopted by UNDP, United Nations Development Program. And the countries on the right-hand side of the red line are the advanced ones. They are the ones that have achieved higher levels of human development. Higher GDP, higher education, higher welfare, and so on and so forth. The ones on the left-hand side are the developing ones, the ones that have not yet achieved that level of human development. The vertical green line shows the world average biocapacity. Biocapacity being the capacity of the land and water to actually suck the carbon and regenerate itself, so it would come out clean back to its natural cycle. And you see that again, those above that green line have crossed the line. They have exhausted their biocapacity, and those below the green line haven't. They haven't ruined their environment yet. So who are they? These little bubbles are the countries. Each one of them is a country. And you can see the ones on the left-hand side, the less developed ones, are below, most of them are below the green line. And almost all the advanced ones are on the right-hand side of the red line, are also above the green line. They have crossed their own biocapacities. So practically, regardless of what type of development we have adopted, is that a nice Scandinavian or an aggressive Anglo-Saxon neoliberalistic one, the welfare state ones or the neoliberal ones, they're all guilty. They're all above their biocapacity. So that argument, if you may remember, that we had, that some of these reformists came out and said, oh, sorry, neoliberalism was oversold. We were not looking after equality. If we look after equality and democracy, we will be able to secure greater rates of economic growth. And they were referring to the golden age of capitalism in the mid-20th century, when we were looking after equality and democracy, and we were enjoying higher rates of economic growth. That doesn't really substantiate any argument here, because if you look at the records, whether we were in the golden age of capitalism and capitalism was being moderated by adopting more socialistic views, or you look at the post-welfare state, during the neoliberal era, since the 70s, 80s, both the records are bad. Well, neoliberalism accelerated the destruction, yes, but still everything started from when we started industrialization in significant scales, in massive scales, when industrialization started to become global. So this is another surface reality that would go against the other surface reality. Yeah, it depends. If depends if we are considering the average lifestyle on an average American as the standard, or maybe a person in the Middle East, or maybe a person in Spain, their average lifestyle would be acceptable. The things that we need to have a dignified uh, lifespan they're not really that big. They're not really that big. A lot of these emissions and a lot of these damages are as the result of not you and me consuming, but rather the production of wealth. You know, if you look at it's even this one, this one is different. This biocapacity thing or ecological footprint is different to the personal footprint of you and me. This is about societies. This includes both consumption and production. If you look at if we pay closer attention to both the videos and the readings, we quickly realize that there are actually begging us to move away from consumption. You know, recycling. Have I done enough recycling or not? I'm guilty. I'm bad. I'm feeling bad. You know, I know the problem is so big, but still I go shopping and those sort of things. That's the individuals are put into this situation. It's a trap. And all these resources that I have been sharing with you, they are arguing against this. They would say, look at the production side, look at the wealth ownership side. If you look at that, you can even go beyond the corporate consumption. Yes, you know, the celebrities, their private jets emits massive amounts of greenhouse gases, incomparable. You have to go for, I don't know how many years of mowing your lawn to match that. That's a huge disparity, huge inequality. But it's not because just, you know, Taylor Swift, as the other video was saying, is emitting too much. It's because you get rid of these corporations, you get rid of the top 1%, still the system reproduces them. Still the system is based on economic growth, and a lot of this growth goes into unnecessary productions, unnecessary accumulation of wealth, and so on and so forth. So it's a distraction to make us think that it's well, we are entitled to survive, we are entitled to have a dignified life, we are entitled, and that would require energy, but and therefore we are all equally guilty. We are all equally guilty. So the degrowth movements is arguing that actually we can stabilize, go for a steady state economy, and we can still be having that, you know, pretty comfortable you know, type of life or lifestyle, or basic needs would be met, and so on and so forth. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And yeah, this is again, we discussed that very briefly in week 1, the 9 planetary boundaries that we have crossed 6 of them, unfortunately, we're in a really difficult situation. The 2 readings I would really recommend you to have a look if you have time. They complement the videos. The first one is written by George Monbiot, is a celebrity of the left, and he became very famous. He published very, you know, kind of bestseller books, especially during the anti World Trade Organization, anti IMF movements, if you may remember, early 2000s. This is a Guardian article written by him, and although the title is appealing, Capitalism is Killing the Planet, but you don't see much talk about capitalism and what capitalism means to him and so on. So he's not really directly relating the problem to capitalism. He's a journalist. He's not a sociologist, but the next one is from a social scientist, Hans Bear, a friend of mine, who attended a symposium that we had in 2018 at UN, and he presented his paper, and I invited him to contribute to actually submit that paper to the handbook that later we started to write, and I had the honor of being the editor of that. So it appeared as chapter 19 in that handbook. It's a good one. He has the habit of writing in plain language, unlike many of other academics. So I hope that you will enjoy. But even if things doesn't make sense, we're not expecting everything would make sense. So just skim through his arguments. They're very interesting. He considers himself as eco-socialist. He advocates for democratic eco-socialism, and he, unlike many other critics of capitalism, he's not turning his back to politics. He even believes that we can go for reform. It's okay, and also we should start establishing new political parties that would truly represent us and would be more radical than the ones we have. So he's inviting people to get involved into the dirty job, unlike many other people who would say, no, politics is too dirty, I don't want to do anything, but I would like to go into, if I want to do anything, I would like to be at the grassroots level, activism, and not much into party politics. But he says, no, there is no contradiction, let's do both. So it's an interesting one. And yes, so these are the two videos. Yes, if we watched one of them yesterday, and then we had a bit of a conversation, but conversation was directed kind of into, again, our personal sense of guilt and sadness, which is very much opposite to what these videos are telling us. If the system is to blame, then we have to, if there is any sense of guilt, it should not be the sense of guilt in relation to our personal consumption and failure in recycling everything and those sort of things, but rather it should be a sense of guilt that is related to our lack of motivation to get involved in something meaningful, even if it is as small as sharing such videos with the friends on Facebook, or looking after, maybe forming some, well, maybe next week we would have some small group discussions of what we can do as individuals in order to put some dents on the system, to actually, because everything, all the major big movements or changes or transformations in human history have happened through, initially they have been very embryonic. They have been very small. They were started from small groups. You just what percentage of humanity consider themselves as Christian? Huge, right? What percentage of humanity consider themselves as Muslims? Huge, right? Billions of people, right? But how did Christianity start? How did Islam start? It started from a very small number of people that dared to question the conventional system of their own time, and they had to face empires, and they've been betrayed by their own communities. They're put on the cross, they've been prosecuted, stoned to death by their own communities. But their message became powerful enough to establish new civilizations for almost a millennium. The Islamic civilization contributed to human history in many positive ways, also Christian movements and so on and so forth. And today, a lot of movements are very much inspired by those revolutionary ideas. Socialism, yes, there's been lots of setbacks and lots of failures, but that doesn't mean that we should give up our own causes and goals and so on and so forth. So these are two interesting ones. So let's go beyond. Both of them are inviting us to go beyond this kind of sense of personal guilt and, you know, the consumption side of this story. Let's pay attention to the production side and who owns how much and what they can do and their political influences and how we can actually push back. Yes, each one of us alone might be able to only do very little things, but our power is in our numbers. And history shows us that people have been able to achieve significant changes when they commit themselves to their causes. So the first one I have to go very briefly through because I think these two readings are very interesting and important, and I've tried to summarize them here through these slides. The first one, as I said, is by George Monbiot. He thinks that the situation has become so dramatic, and despite this, the responses don't really match the crisis. And he raises this as a question. So he gives himself, he tasks himself to answer that question, that why the responses do not match the crisis. So since he's a journalist, his approach to answering this question is journalistic and not in a negative sense, but it's not that sociological. So he pays attention to the way how people are manipulated, and then how actually the media, what role the media, especially the mass media, the corporate media, has played in politicians and the rhetorics and the narratives and so on and so forth. So we think that, you know, everybody would, yes, I mean, the science behind climate change is so complex, it's very difficult to reach out to people to make the science make sense to people. But then people would say, okay, if it were really so serious, someone would stop us. You know, we have kind of indoctrinated ourselves into this belief that if there's something serious, there are some people that would look after the situation. There should be some wisdom in the system, and if there is no one has come up to stop us, then maybe that's not that serious, right? So do you think that's what ordinary people think, or most of us think? Well, I have been teaching this course for more than a decade, and every time I cover this, and in the past I used to cover more data about climate change, which was getting really dramatic. Like psychologically and mentally, I'm not finding myself capable of doing that because it just scares everybody to death. The IPCC reports that came out, they're really scary. And then every time after the discussion and the presentation, I was left with this question: if that situation is so dramatic, that is captured in the as it is captured in the reports and sciences, why we're not witnessing mass movements, massive number of people blockading the parliaments and having, you know, going for endless sit-ins, like what happened in the Arab Spring. People went to the public squares and they took the tents and they children and families, and they sat there and said, we're not going to leave the public spaces until the regime gives up. So why people are not doing that? It's existential threat. It's an existential threat. Why people are not going for mass civil disobedience as Extinction Rebellion people are asking us to do? How can really make sense of this situation? You know, and I agree with this guy that actually the response, not only the response from the bloody system, but even from us, doesn't match the problem. Well, he tries to explain that, you know, that we are kind of indoctrinated into putting too much emphasis on little things, you know, things that are not really matter. And then the mass media, the corporate media are the weapons of mass distraction. They distract us from important things. he refers to things like, for instance, cake to climate ratio. I don't know if you have read that. That's an interesting one. And you count the number of times a concept like cake emerges in the public discourses, in the mass media, in the news or whatever. And then compare it with the number of times climate appears, and it seems that a word cake is more frequently used than climate. The news always about the gossips, who said what and who said what to whom, and who is in, who is out. You just go home and just want to watch TV or listen to the radio or read a newspaper or get on a website or check the news, all about things that doesn't really matter. Even if we talk about the environment, well, in that video, it addresses capitalism more directly than the article. So I put that there for you if you want to watch. So yeah, the media frantic distraction, the trivialization of public life, deadly flippancy or shallowness, socially impossible to talk about important things. The news has become court gossip and so on and so forth. He develops the concept of surface tension, which means tension between what we know about the crisis and the lack of seriousness, even when we try to address the crisis. Even if we try to address the crisis, we're terrified about the seahorses being affected, or solar bears being affected, polar bears being affected. Yes, they are important. Yeah, definitely. The life of polar bears is important. It's a symptom. It's a sign of the crisis. But we miss the bigger picture. We miss the jungle. We miss the forest for the trees. He doesn't say that little things don't matter. He says that every little thing counts, but not for very much. And so we shouldn't. And he thinks that it's not, this distraction is not kind of, because it's embedded in our human nature that we would try to avoid big things and we pay attention to little things. Our attention scope is narrow, and those sort of psychological BS that tries to imply that it's the way we are structured. So he thinks that it's deliberate effort. Sorry, that's a mistake. It's not deliberative. It's deliberate effort. He thinks that it's a deliberate effort to stop us seeing the bigger picture. And the companies, actually, the corporations, are very well aware of that. It's not the human nature not to pay attention to the bigger picture. It's actually the corporations that make us to think this way, to see this way. Their campaigns like Keep America Beautiful, Keep Britain Tidy, Love Where You Live, and those sort of things. He thinks these are all MCBs, micro consumerist bullshit or bullocks, or it's a nonsense. So MCB means a polite way of saying yes. He thinks these are all MCB, and they are very much deliberate. Another example that he refers to is the British Petroleum that has rebranded itself Beyond Petroleum. It's like a tiger that has become vegetarian, a vegetarian tiger, or edible shit, or something like that. So the personal carbon footprint is invented by the BP. That the purpose of that is, as he says, is shifting pressure from producers to consumers. But not only that, it's shifting the pressure from the producers to consumers. That would make us feel guilty and therefore powerless as individuals, as consumers, but also practically not only to shift the attention, the pressure from the producers, from the capital owners to, as we said before, value takers to value makers, but also to turn us from collective citizens that are potentially capable of changing the system to just individual consumers who are not capable. I mean, we're atomistic, we're atoms separated from each other into our own silos, and therefore we would feel powerless. And that's the agenda behind this. And he doesn't talk directly about capitalism, but he refers to some core aspect of capitalism, that urge for endless growth, universally hailed as measure of government success and healthy economy. Imagine, as I said before, imagine a politician comes out and says campaigns for degrowth. I'm going to actually push for degrowth. Who would vote for that person? And even you and me may not vote, because that would affect our jobs, right? If the economy starts to shrink, to maintain a healthy level of employment, the economy should grow as per general conventions among the economists, capitalist economists. The economy should grow at the rate of 3% minimum in the GDP. So, well, below that, that means you're going to lose jobs. So either cut jobs or cut trees. You can't save both trees and jobs. Well, that's because it's embedded. That contradiction is embedded in a system that pursues economic growth. Grow or die. Grow or die is the DNA of capitalism, because it's about accumulation of capital. Otherwise, if you have accumulated less, you're going to lose it to your competitors. Capitalism has become a taboo and hard to define. I mean, as we said before, we talk to ordinary people and they say, well, it's hard to define, but I mean, it's also about hard work. Maybe if you press them to say something about their understanding of capitalism, most of us would say it's about hard work, free enterprises, buying and selling, things that have been around for many centuries. They're not really unique to the current system that we live in. We're not fighting over the name. Let's call it charitism or instead of capitalism. But whatever it is, it has its own very basic, very core features that are actually a threat to organized life. So, but when you look at the reality, practically, it's not what we were thinking about capitalism. It's the greater fortune doesn't go to the hard work. The greater fortune goes to those who have the upper hand, the ones that own massive amounts of wealth and capital. And it's not just new, as some people would like us to think, that capitalism has become corrupt. In the golden age, it was better, and let's go back to the golden age. Well, the golden age might have been better for the global north, for the so-called advanced societies, but it was a hell for the rest of the societies, for the rest of the globe. And historically, capitalism, the accumulation of capital needed for the Industrial Revolution, was achieved as the result of mass looting, monopolies growing, grabbing lands and resources and slaves, and the inheritance laws and so on and so forth. So an example that he refers as a result of the research that came out about the colonization of India by Britain over 200 years, the amount of looting or plunder was about $45 trillion just from India. And then you ignore that, and then you say hard work and these sort of things are going to make a difference. Come on, the productivity is going to make a difference. The reason the poor countries are poor is because they're not as productive as the rich countries are. That's a joke. So and then it's not just the past thing; it's also the looting or theft from future. Just look at this financial system that puts us into endless debt. Household debt, constantly growing, the plunder of resources that leaves the next generations with nothing to sustain life, not much energy to have that dignified life. So that's and then we call that the motor of economic, the motor of economic growth. Yeah. So from his point of view, capitalism is, ecologically speaking, is nothing but a pyramid scheme. That by that, I believe he means that the benefits of economic activities are reaped by those at the top of the pyramid, and the ones below are left to deal with the ecological consequences. Just a means to a means to pursue wealth. So he also talks about the carbon budget as an example. For instance, if we want to keep the temperature below 1.5, we are very close to that. It's a little bit too late to talk about this one. Anyway, how much carbon we can altogether globally emit to keep that temperature 1.5? Based on the calculations, it should be 2 tons of carbon per person per year. But you look at the top 1% rich people, they emit 70 tons, and the average Australian 18.6. Again, when we say average Australian, let's not think that you and Gina Reinhardt are in the same page. He also advocates for wealth tax. That might remind you of another person who was advocating for wealth tax. Do you remember his name? The French guy, Thomas Piketty, right? The author of the famous book, Capital in 21st Century. We discussed that before. So, but instead of carbon tax, he thinks that carbon tax is a sham, is a kind of MCB, and that's why it's favored by ExxonMobil. And wealth tax would disrupt the flow of capital from the bottom of pyramid to the top of the pyramid. So he refers to the connection between wealth and political power. So if we tax the wealth, therefore we will also disrupt the political power of the wealthy. And he considered things like, everyone can become a billionaire as a myth. And if we adopt that, the earth will be cooked in no time. The wealth tax breaks the spiral of accumulation, collective action. He also advocates for collective action, not just taxing the rich. But it seems that he is very much on the side of reformists than radicals, although he is also pro-extinction rebellion, an activist in that movement as well. And he advocates for private sufficiency. And that might address the concern, the question you raised about the energy that we need to survive and have a dignified life. It says that, well, private sufficiency, let's go for private sufficiency, that every individual would have things as much as it gives them the sufficiency they need. Their basic needs are met, but it's the public. But we can afford to go for public luxury instead of private. But what we have is that we have private poverty and public sufficiency in advanced societies, and even public poverty in the poor countries. So public luxury means better, greater, health system, quality education, quality public transport, and so on. So if we go and invest in the public, then therefore we don't need to be, a lot of this energy can be saved instead of everybody driving their personal cars and so on and so forth. Even with the electricity cars, we need a lot of resources to go into that. He hesitates to call this socialism. It sounds like a new socialism, but he hesitates to call it socialism as far as I could see in that article. But the next one by Hans doesn't hesitate to mention socialism. He actually very directly advocates for something that he calls democratic ecosocialism. And he just go through these slides. I don't think I have time to explain them one by one. Anthropocene, Capitalocene, and the feminists would say Anthropocene because it's men are more responsible historically compared to women. Why not addressing the gender imbalance in the climate mess that we are in? Someone like me from Global South may say, why not using the term Eurocene, because the Global South is not as responsible as Global North. You can see that each one of these terms, as I said before, stresses on something important but misses on other things. So if you want to emphasize on the role of humanity or humans versus non-humans, maybe Anthropocene. If we want to emphasize on the role of capital or capitalism, maybe let's use capitalism. So it depends on the context. If we would like to highlight the gender aspect, let's use the word Anthropocene. So I would say that let's take a more flexible terminology instead of fighting each other over what's the best term or what's the best concept when we are all being screwed. So he talks about the capitalist treadmill of production consumption. He also focuses on the lesser entities like George Monbiot, but he doesn't, by lesser entities, by little things, it doesn't just mean, unlike George Monbiot, it doesn't just mean personal behaviors. He even considers corporations as lesser entities, big corporations. Why? Yes, exactly. Unless you end the system, these corporations will keep coming back and they would behave. Even so, it's you tame them, they push back. You control them, they push back. You regulate them, they push back. They keep pushing back. So they are compared to the system that gives them the opportunity. They are lesser things. C also talks about the 3 dimensions of the climate capital nexus or connection. So the impact of capitalism on global carbon cycle, the pursuit of profit and economic growth has led to the development of energy intensive industries, transportation systems, and lifestyles that rely heavily on fossil fuels. And he also talks about another thing that is very interesting, called is known as Jevons paradox or reband effect. Have you heard of that? Yeah, it's not that complex. It means that it's about technological efficiency. You increase technological efficiency, that reduces the emission intensity, and you're happy and you think, well, we have achieved something. We have reduced, my car is now hybrid or my car is electric car, so it's more efficient in consuming the fossil fuels, for instance, or emitting fossil fuels. But that would increases the demand because more and more people want to have that. So the overall consumption, the overall purchase, the overall consumption increases. For instance, you can think of the air cons that have become more efficient in consuming electricity, but the overall consumption of the air cons has increased. More and more people now want more air cons. Or you think that, oh well, okay, this is more efficient. Let's run it for another hour or 2 hours or something like that. So you will start using it more often. A lot of people that use solar panels, for instance, and that is they say that 20 to 25% of the energy saved is cancelled out by the overuse or excessive use of other forms of energy. So that's one of the aspects of the inadequacy of technological solutions. That the technology is far from adequate. We need to address the system itself. And he also talks about the destruction of the carbons. It's not just the emission, but also the capacity of the Earth system to actually cancel out the impact. It has been in decline. Deforestation being one of the major aspect of it, the acidification of the oceans as well. So population growth, he questions the idea that the population growth plays any significant role in climate change, because the data shows that actually in the regions that we have witnessing population growth, higher rates of population growth, the emission of the greenhouses hasn't been that much. It's more about development. It's more about industrialization rather than the population. And in fact, the countries that are poorer as the result of the poverty they experience and the lack of education, especially for women, they experience higher rates of population growth. So population growth is a symptom of a failed system. And then we go to the international meetings and summits and those sort of things, and the politicians would say, well, we're going to take some measures, and they take some measures, but they are incomparable to the other measures that they take or we take in favor of the system. So, for instance, developmentalism. We're putting a lot of pressure on the global south to develop, to become developed, following the same industrialization pattern that we went, and at the same time we deprive them of the new technologies they need in order to reduce their emissions, because they're expensive, and of course we would like to maintain our own monopoly over such technologies and so on and so forth. So with further advancement of the economy, emission density declines. So yes, but accumulation. Oh, that's about Jevons. Yes, and another thing that we do opposite to what we claim, we promise, massive government subsidies to fossil fuel companies that has reached 300 to 500 billions per year. So we subsidize fossil fuels in such huge amounts, and we don't spend a smallest fraction of that in order to mitigate the climate change. So it's as Greta was saying, it's all blah blah blah. The issue of inequality, as we said, which is very much embedded in climate justice, and most of the time I think that inequality is the byproduct of a failed system like climate change, but inequality actually is or can be or is a cause of climate change. How could that be? How could inequality contribute to climate change? Actually, in many ways, actually. But I was mostly thinking of not only that, but also inequality. What we mean by inequality? What's the most important version or type of inequality that determines almost everything? That's the most horrendous aspect of it. It's the inequality between us in terms of what? Yes, and capitalism. When we use wealth, the term wealth means, well, could include houses and yachts and private cars and private jets and those sort of things. They're not really that important in shaping the system because they're not being reinvested back into the system. So, but when we use the word capital instead of wealth, then we're referring to a type of wealth that is powerful, that is very powerful. And if you have it, you control it, you have the means of production, you control the means of production, you control the means of circulation of wealth, like the banking systems, you control the means of governance, like the policies and the politics and so on and so forth. So capital, so it's the inequality in the ownership of capital. So how would that inequality causes climate change? Well, it's not that complex. Those who control capital, they would like to have the system working for them, increasing the mass of capital, increasing the rate of the growth of their capital. So therefore, their behaviors, their policies, their agendas are all about looking after their own interests, against the interest of the communities, the public, the general well-being of the community and the non-human beings. Therefore, they pursue economic growth, the higher rates of maximization of the profit, and they don't care about the consequences. The consequences would be externalized. That's for the society to look after the ecological consequences, the social consequences, the socio-economic consequences. It's not our job. Our job is we're just the engines of economic growth. We bring the wealth and we make the society wealthy, and then the society would look after itself. So they would therefore externalize it. So and therefore they not only contribute to climate crisis, but also they create obstacles. They create political and economic obstacles for those sectors of the society that want to address the climate crisis, and then therefore become conspirators practically. So I would say inequality in the control over resources and production leads to the behaviors aimed at short-term profit, serving the interest of capital owners. This behavior prioritizes capital gains over the general well-being of populations and their environments. This manifests as a non-sustainable consumption patterns and supply chains built on the exploitation of cheap labor and resources, particularly in the global south. It also results in the over-extraction of the finite resources and the diminishing of regulations through political influence. Yeah, also he talks about social consequences. So he criticized green capitalism. He thinks that green capitalism or reforming capitalism, making capitalism ecologically friendly or environmentally friendly is another BS. So it's the power, the consequence of that would be the power of the powerful will remain unchallenged, expansive nature of capitalism forgotten, wages will decline further, states become more authoritarian, and so on and so forth. And he thinks that we need to go for global networks of social movements for climate change. That's at the grassroots level, but he does not deny political reforms and reformism. I would say he advocates for non-reformist reforms, not the shallow reforms, but more structural, more radical reforms. Ultimately, he advocates for a different world system that is based on eco-socialist goals like meeting social needs globally, high degrees of equality, socialized ownership instead of privatized, participatory democracy, environmental sustainability, and commitment to safe climate. But he acknowledges that these goals are big and ambitious, and they may not be achieved over a short period of time. So therefore, we have to also consider some transitional reforms, non-reformist reform. And he lists 14 items under that title. I would invite you to look at them: improvement in public transport and some sustainable health systems and sustainable welfare systems and so on and so forth. So we advocates for radical climate governance from below. There's a very interesting video that I have also shared on the on Canvas, the week 5 module. I invite you to watch that if you have time. This lady is an expert, and she's been studying climate change, the politics and the economy of climate change for decades, and she's very, very bright. Not everything can make sense. I'm not an economist or politician or political scientist, and I don't expect you to be. But she also makes, she also refers to the Jevons paradox and the problems that are embedded in this. This is a YouTube channel that we picked up we chose the two YouTube videos from this one, so you can find a lot of interesting things in there. You are already familiar with the second thought. One of the videos was from this channel. This one, I possibly should have chosen this one as one of the required YouTubes, but it's a very interesting one because he talks about an experimentation that happened in France. So they chose randomly, they selected non-expert members of the society, ordinary people. They put them into a group. They gave them all the resources, the data, information, everything they wanted, and they asked them to come up with some solutions for climate change. At least for France, in terms of their policies and their agendas. And they came up with very, very interesting and very advanced solutions, to the extent that they were not acceptable to the elite. So Macron decided to veto them. But he talks about their solutions and how progressive they were. So a lot of us are made to believe, to think that since we are not experts, so we don't have the knowledge required for developing this meaningful solutions, but you put the ordinary people together and give them the opportunity and information and the resources, they will do much better than the politicians that are very much influenced by those corrupt ideologies that serves the interest of the elite. Because they're not biased, because they're just genuine in thinking about the interest of their families, their own communities. Well, if that's the problem, the solution is really pretty straightforward. But we are made to believe that, not to believe in ourselves. yeah, I have friends that would say that politics is too dirty, you don't want to be involved. And I don't think that's but I'm very much disappointed with many of these political parties, including the Greens, because they're not really, I mean, they're still capitalist Greens, you know, they're not. But on the other hand, when I look at the socialistic ones, the little ones, and not only they have, apart from, you know, if they have any chance to take any seats or not, you know, that depends on how many people would vote for them. It's not their problem. But I see that they're stuck in the 20th century with this all very old classical understanding of what capitalism is, and you can hardly find them open to accepting the new conditions and new problems we have, and the necessity of going beyond the idea that the working class is still a kind of a united class of social class capable of pioneering a revolution. It should now be expanded beyond the idea of working class as the pioneer, as the only revolutionary class. So yeah, maybe I mean, at least maybe there are some.
This.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, um, me being me, I was not really satisfied still with the videos and the readings in terms of their ability to connect climate to capital. So I came up with some 9 points that tries to clarify how the climate crisis and the environmental degradation we are experiencing is very much related to the core aspects of capitalism. So here is the result of my effort to do that. So the first one is the intimate relationship between capitalism and modern colonialism has created a deep-seated dependence on cheap, non-renewable resources, primarily sourced from indigenous lands and global south to fuel economic growth. So that relationship between capitalism and modern colonialism, the fact that made this capitalism dependent on cheap resources, because from the beginning, that marriage between capitalism and colonialism made our modern civilization very much dependent on such cheap and non-renewable resources, and we made us very addicted to that. Capitalism is inherently driven by the need for constant growth and competition, which makes it difficult to prioritize ecological sustainability, while the state-led regulations can help to temper this growth. The system's underlying functionality still requires ongoing economic expansion. However, reversing the rate of ecological destruction requires a fundamental shift away from growth-focused models and towards degrowth. So that the fact that the growth is the DNA of the capitalist system makes it inherently incompatible with the issue of the so-called ecological sustainability, if we're really serious about that. Number 3, capitalism relies heavily on technological innovation to increase efficiency and profitability. By efficiency, they don't mean that things would be more, suitable for ecological well-being. Thereby, efficiency means that you reduce the input and increase the output, and that's called efficiency. And that is very much closely tied to profitability. So if something is not profitable, it's not efficient. And that, however, paradoxically, any innovation in ecological efficiency has often resulted in increase in the use of natural resources. That, as we said before, due to the increase in demand, known as the Jevons paradox, for example, more efficient air conditioning. Yeah, we talked about that before. Number 4, capitalism, particularly in its new liberal form, leads to greater wealth inequality, which in turn contributes to the rise of monopolies and plutocracy. The concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a small elite class enables them to influence policies and politics in the ways that benefits their interests, including subsidizing their dependence on cheap, non-renewable resources. This has been estimated to cost the global economy between 300 to 500 billion years per year. Number 5, corporate capitalism has a strong tendency to externalize the ecological costs and consequences of their economic activities as part of its inherent tendency to reduce costs and maximize profit. That externalization we talk about. Number 6, finance or casino capitalism has become relatively superior to industrial productive capital and thus reluctant to meaningfully invest in saving the planet. Also, it highly depends on the cloud, heavily energized by fossil fuel, example of being Bitcoin mining, especially. Are you familiar with Bitcoin mining and how energy intensive that is? And it constantly exponentially become more and more energy. You have to put more and more computers together in order to mine Bitcoin. And a lot of global countries in global south that subsidize their fossil fuel energy production, they spend that energy to mine such cryptocurrencies. Renewable energy sources make up, for instance, only 11% of energy used by data centers globally, according to Greenpeace report. Number 7, capitalism's globalization on the back of developmentalism and the neoliberalism has resulted in the export of polluting industries to the global south and the rapid industrialization of the developing countries. And number 8, it's about the monopolization of new, efficient, and renewable. So it's not just the fossil fuels that we should blame. These corporations are all extending their tentacles into the renewable energy, because even if the sun and the wind are for free, but the technology to harness that energy is not for free. And those who have monopolies over that technology consider themselves more capable of controlling the future. Sorry, and thank you for being patient with this, but I thought that these slides would not only complement, but also give us perhaps a more inclusive and more comprehensive and a little bit deeper perspective than what we find in the videos. Unfortunately, we don't have time to watch the videos. But I don't know, have you watched them yourself? Yeah, okay. Yes, let's have a look at these. Even if we haven't watched the videos, still based on what I presented here, we should be still able to answer these questions, because they're very much in alliance with what I presented here. According to the first video, why capitalism is killing us, why does capitalism contribute to environmental crisis? Let's guess which one would be the right answer. And because it encourages the overproduction beyond the Earth's capacity, or focuses solely on short-term profit gains, or is that because its reliance on competitive market results in technological innovation, or inherently supports the transition to green energy? First one, yes. What does the video suggest as a necessary approach to address the climate crisis and move beyond capitalism's limitation? Incremental policy changes to reduce emission, focusing on technological innovation in renewable energy, radical transformation towards systems that prioritize ecological balance, or encouraging individual lifestyle changes? Yes, yeah, of course, you go for radical transformation. According to the video, what is the major flaw in relying on market-based solutions to address climate change? Market-based solutions have been universally rejected. They address inequality that is not a priority regarding climate change. They are too costly. They essentially prioritize profit over genuine environmental sustainability. Which one? So the second video is about, these are the questions for the so far only 2. So according to the video, how the rich really cause climate change, what is a fundamental misdirection in how society typically addresses climate change? Focusing on the carbon footprints of individuals is a misdirection. Blaming climate change solely on natural cycles is a misdirection. Renewable energy technologies can be part of solution is a misdirection. climate change can be addressed without relying on tech is a misdirection. Yeah, we can think of BPs. Food ecological, individual ecological footprint, which Monbiot was saying was MCB. So what does the video, the second one, suggest is more effective approach to combating climate change than focusing on individual consumption habits? Is a more effective approach to combat. Okay, and strictly enforcing global carbon taxes on all individuals, promoting a culture of minimalism and personal austerity, establishing democratic control over production and prioritizing class politics, relying on large corporations to voluntarily reduce the emission. Yeah, establishing democratic control is obviously the most profound, most effective. Well, different people may mean different things, but in general, it means that what would entitle the owner of capital to just take the products for themselves and do whatever they want with it, just simply because they have paid something as wages to the producers, to the workers? What on earth makes us to think that they have such an entitlement? Is that because of their ownership over the means of production? Where does that come from? Where does that come from? Is it an inheritance? Is that because of the looting of the other countries and societies? You need a lot of money to run an industry. Where does that money come from? We were all born equally poor, and then these people were genius enough to amass that amount of wealth in their very short period of their life. You see that it starts to break down. I mean, they are about those who produce. They should also be entitled to decide what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, what to do with the profit, and to what extent they would produce. Consider the boundaries, ecological boundaries of the impact of their production activities, and so on and so forth. So it means the democratization of workplaces, most of the businesses. This doesn't mean that you and me shouldn't have our own little shop in the corner of a street. Every individual is entitled to have their own individual properties and make money in any ways they want, as far as that's lawful. But as far as that enterprise starts to grow in size, affecting a community, affecting others, the number of stakeholders increases. Therefore, it's not justified anymore to be privately owned. When Obama was saying these big corporations, these big banks are too big to fail. I mean, if they are too big to fail, why we didn't say that they're too big to be privately owned? What if they are too big? They should be then collectively owned. Petty shareholders like you and me, that the superannuation goes into that, and we get a little slice of that, and every time it goes down, we are all going down. And the giant shareholders, the ones that own most of it, and they have someone on the board, and they're not democratically elected. It's all it's the wealth of them that determines their influence on the. So none of these corporations are democratically run. They are Soviet 101. It's interesting. We have built the entire economy on the back of corporations that are run like the Soviet, like North Korea. The CEO says this, everybody just, yes, sir, yes, sir. And we talk against the Soviet. We talk against, North Korea, but the entire economic system is the Soviet. You have any questions or anything to say, or? Any questions, anything? Well, yes, so next week we're not going to have any classes, unfortunately, but the week after we will come back, and hopefully we'll have something about the commentary to discuss. So please start reading and writing the commentary. And thank you so much for your patience. All the best. So we can end the session if there's no question.